Garrett, before I hand off to you, I'm gonna quickly intro both you and Dan. So I'm super excited to be here. Every time I listen to Garrett or Dan, I learn something new, and I feel like I'm pretty smart and I know things, but I'm always learning from these two. So Garrett is my business partner. We have a consulting practice together, and then Dan is in my sidebar circle. So we're in the Thunders Solopreneur Circle. And it was so fun for me to introduce the two of them together. They both live in Portland. And then over the last few months, they've been collaborating and teaching a bunch of vibe coding boot camps, well, beyond vibe coding. So they'll share more. But today is really to teach all of us. Some of us are already starting to vibe code, but getting stuck, whether that's the last mile or more advanced like SOC 2 compliance. So I think we'll have a lot that we can learn from both of them today. So with that, I'm just going to hand over to Dan and Garrett. So excited to have you with us today. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Ha. Appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. If it sounds a little echoey here, I just literally moved into a new office as of last night, so I don't have anything on the wall yet. So I'll try not to echo too much. Apologies if it's echoing. You may hear my cat. So I have a Siberian forest cat that's a guard cat, and he's very protective and loud. So just warn you in advance if you hear a cat meowing, that's what it is. All right. Thanks, everybody. It's glad to, we're really excited to be here, and we're just glad to have you all join us. All of the, both Garrett and I and Ha, we're all really passionate about this topic of vibe coding. Um, and it's something that kind of near and dear to our hearts, trying to enable and empower the builders of the future. We are in this super interesting inflection point in the world where all of a sudden non-technical people can build. They can build software, things that were traditionally kept behind, let's say, a barrier of you have to speak code, you have to exist on a software engineering team, you have to be a product manager. You can't just be a knowledge worker. You can't be somebody out of ops or a creative. You can't be somebody who's non-technical and do this stuff. Well, all of a sudden, wow, now you can. Um, but that first evolution of vibe coding was kind of interesting. And we're going to talk a bit about that. We're going to talk about what vibe coding 2.0 is about. So not, going into this talk, Garrett and I were talking about the fact that we've got a real wide range of folks on this call. We got folks that have probably never vibe coded, people that are maybe just prompting an AI, maybe not even doing that. And then we've got people who are playing around and trying to build things. So this is skewing towards that common denominator. So there may be some things here you already know. If that's the case, that's great. If there's things you don't know, that's awesome. That's what we're here to chat about. And there is a lot more where this came from. So if this just tickles your fancy and it gets you excited, we've got some stuff to tell you at the end, how to learn more, where to go practice, how to get support, all that sort of stuff. All right. So what we're going to talk about today is vibe coding 2.0, really going from magic prompting, where you just kind of put a bunch of prompts in and magically something appears. Unfortunately, most of it doesn't work in production. It looks cool, like a magic trick, but you couldn't really do that in real life without the magic trick, right? So we're moving from that to this thing called architectural intent. And don't let the big words fool you. This is actually pretty straightforward. Um, and I'm going to preface this by saying Garrett and I and Haw have all been part of and working with the Snap Camp. So I know a bunch of you are probably familiar with Snap Camp. Haw's been super vocal. She's got a lot of people to come to those camps. I've done it. Garrett's done it. Garrett and I now co-teach it. Most of the people that go to Snap Camp are non-technical. That's what makes it so cool. And we're going to show you some examples of what people have been able to do in Snap Camp. So hopefully you're coming in curious and interested. Second thing, please, if you've got questions or while I'm going along and Garrett and I are chatting, please put them in the chat. Let's get those as part of the conversation, okay? So what has changed? The bottleneck is no longer writing code. The bottleneck now for people to vibe code well is just basically orchestrating. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How can you become an orchestrator of tools and processes and systems so you can produce something, uh, build something that's actually usable? So, we'll talk a bit about that. This is myself and Garrett. Um, Personally, I've been working in the AI space for over 15 years now. Um, Started back in 2008, actually. So maybe that's a little more than 15. But anyway, been playing around with machine learning, computer vision, natural language processing, large language models, agents, the whole shoot and match. I'm a builder at heart. I've been building for 30 plus years. So I come into this with that mindset. You might be asking, why am I doing this? Because I'm really passionate about enabling the next wave of builders, all the non-technical people, the millions of people who should and could be building. Garrett, want to say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I like Dan alluded to earlier, I couple of things. I took the first boot camp at Haas, nudging and advice, and I was like, vibe codings? What are we vibing about? And how does that relate to coding? And I went through it, and kind of like Dan said, it felt like magic on the screen. And I went through it, learned it, and I think, and I'm stubborn, so I refused to use the engineering hours that this boot camp and our boot camp offers. And I just wanted to figure it out and stumble through it. And so I got to learn quite a bit that way. And I think what that helped me do is understand how to translate from an engineer's and a very technical person's perspective on this stuff to somebody who has none of those things, but has gone through it. And so what I do is I facilitate our boot camps now, from the non-technical perspective, and help articulate and break down these concepts into hopefully easy to understand and digestible ways so you can grasp it, get your hands on it, and feel confident and comfortable, both in knowing that this guy who has no experience could do it, so can I, but also learning in a way that translates to your background and experience. And I equate that to, you probably don't want to learn how to swim from Michael Phelps, who's probably forgotten all of those fundamentals and early stage things that it takes to go on that crawl part of the crawl, walk, run journey. And so I help facilitate and teach from the crawl perspective, I suppose. My background, as it shows here, is in strategy, operations. It's what I do for my clients now, as a fractional consultant. And so the thing about AI that Dan also alluded to is the orchestration. It's the workflow, the process, the strategic thinking that allows you to then use these tools in an effective way to guide you in your build. And so from an operational perspective, it's all about the details, the step-by-step workflow to achieve the outcome. How do we measure that success of that outcome, that we know it's working? And then from that foundation, leverage these tools around that. And so from that sense, it's been helpful to have my background. But yeah, I'll stop there and let the kind of rest of the slides get to the specific details of a lot of what I just covered. But that's me.
Excellent. Thanks, Garrett. Um, Folks, this is not a pitch for the boot camp. We will give you boot camp information at the end if you're interested. You can go to our boot camp, you can go to a different boot camp. We're just super excited about helping folks get on the train and not get left behind. And so that's why we're doing it. Um, we've got about 500 boot camp participants, experiences from about 500 boot camp participants, let alone our own building and developing, that have kind of informed everything we're about to show you. All right. So let's talk vibe coding 101, first wave of vibe coding, which really has been around for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I know it seems like forever we've been hearing this vibe coding term, but it's really not that old. It's really a relatively new thing. And vibe coding had a lot of promise, right? Just fire up a tool and start talking to your chat window and let the AI coding assistant just build stuff. And I just heard some folks say, yeah, I've done that. Um, there's what we call the trust cliff, unfortunately. There's a lot of data about what has occurred in the last 18 months. And a lot of the results are pretty poor. So vibe coding's had a huge promise and there is a future. But the early days, things just don't really work. Um, these are examples. The data you see here is from a whole bunch of different studies that were looking at the outcomes and outputs of vibe coding. And what they found was that vibe coding lets you code super fast. It lets AI code super fast. The problem is that it creates about twice as much code as it actually needs, and you end up with a lot of defective code. So a lot of reworking, that's the 2 times code churn. So you're not really productive. You might be coding faster, but you're kind of like driving, your car's super fast. You're banging off other cars while you're going down the highway. You got to fix your car. Um, Defects, just on average, have jumped in code bases by 70%. You see 4 times the amount of code than you really need in a lot of instances. This again is just letting the coding assistants do their thing without any human judgment, human gatekeeping, etc. There's about 50% of the time you got to refactor, and developer trust just overall has gone from 70% to 29%. And this is data from software engineers who are using vibe coding. So these are people, technical people in those roles that would traditionally be software engineering teams trying to vibe code. So if they're going to fail, pretty much everybody else is going to have a lot of failure. It's not an easy thing. And there's been a lot of learnings over the last 18 months. Direct learnings that we have from doing the boot camps and also our own projects, but just generally knowledge in the industry. So the industry evidence points to, hey, vibe coding had this great promise. Move at speed, you'll get really efficient, be super productive, and actually the opposite has occurred. So promise has not fulfilled. It's not to say that there aren't some really cool things that have been built, but they haven't been built by coding in the way that it's promised. You can't just pick up a tool and make it happen. So if any of you have had that experience where you thought, why can't I figure this out? Everybody else is having success. I'm here to tell you not everybody's having success. In fact, most people aren't. So if you haven't had success, you're having an average experience. Okay. And here are 4 examples at scale. These are big companies. You can probably recognize these names where Vibe Coding 1.0 broke at scale. Like VDub, this one blew my mind. 20 million lines of code that they wrote vibe coding, and it resulted in a delay of their automobile OS. They had to cut 1,600 jobs as a result. Now imagine you wrote 20 million lines of code, you got to refactor all that. So it's just a huge investment wasted. Klarna, which tried to be agent first with customer support, they got burned. Ended up losing a lot of customers. AWS, even Amazon is even susceptible to this. So what do we learn from this? What we learned is that you can't just let the tools do their thing. So autonomy without verification is really a liability. And I'm going to give you a couple of quotes here that I've learned over my career that have served me well. It's something I learned back in the late 90s when I first became a product manager. And that is, all code is a liability. Every time you write a line of code, it's a liability. It's also an asset, but it's a liability because you got to maintain it and you got to make sure it's the right line of code. So just building and building faster is either a fast way to a lot of liability or a fast way to an asset. There's a big distinction between the two. And that's part of what Vibe Coding 2.0 is about. How do you make it an asset and not a liability? And I don't remember who made that comment, but you don't know what you don't know, right? If you're not a software engineer, you don't even know the terms. You not even know the processes. So you don't know what questions to ask. That's part of what plagues Vibe Coding 1.0 and 2.0, but there's a way around it. So 2 big failure modes in Vibe Coding 1.0. I'm sure everybody's been plagued with this. Garrett, feel free to chime in here, but this idea of context collapse, which is, I'm sure you've all heard this. Oh, just shove all your documents and all your context into your chat window and let AI figure out what's important. That's how you I mean, you just shove more and more and more content into it. And what you do is you overload the signal and you lead to these three huge problems in vibe coding 1.0. I'm sure there's some people here nodding their heads saying, yeah, I've had that. Maybe you didn't call it memory decay. Maybe you didn't call it drift. Maybe you didn't call it overlap, but that is what's going on. Too
Yeah.
much context is the problem.
And
Yeah.
so those that have gone through these terms and this experience probably resonates deeply with you. We've all gone through it who have touched these tools. For those that haven't, or maybe haven't run into it, when you're communicating with an LLM through this context window, you're providing instructions via English language, natural language, with context and hopefully as much clarity as you can provide. But when you do that, the LLM's base training is to deliver exactly what it thinks you want as quickly and efficiently as possible. So it's incentivized to take shortcuts, not root cause analysis, think through. And the more context you give it, the more tokens it spends and the more processing and analyzing it has to do. And its drive is efficiency. And so it throws out, without you knowing it, it throws out context and starts to lose memory the more context and the more time you spend with it. And that results in this term drift or memory decay or context overlap, where you might unintentionally give it some rules that you think are mutually exclusive, but actually conflict in some way. And then it makes a choice or gets confused and then starts hallucinating or drifting even further. And you don't know why it happened. And so this is different ways of contextualizing context collapse for those that maybe haven't put their hands on these tools yet or experienced it.
Yeah, that's a great, great definition. Um, it's not even the situation where you recognize there's been context collapse. It's when you don't even realize it's happened, especially if you're trying to vibe code something, maybe like a website or a tool or a prototype, and it looks fine on the screen, but it doesn't behave the way you want, and you can't figure out why. And then you realize, oh, the AI was being creative, but I didn't give it instructions to be creative. Well, it did that on its own because all of these problems occurred. So this is probably one of the most common failure modes with vibe coding 1.0. You might ask yourself, well, shoot, if too much context is a problem and too little is a problem, then how do you figure out what the right amount is? And there are methodologies to do that. So vibe coding 2.0, this gets to the heart of what is different with vibe coding 2.0.
And real quick, Dan, I have a question in chat I want to ask you
Go for
to
it.
verbalize for the group. We both might have a perspective on this, but I'd love to hear yours. Quite a few companies are doing big layoffs, saying with AI they have more redundancies than before. But
Mhm.
we do see case studies like this where we're still as an industry learning and adjusting and improving. What's your hot take? And like Lakshmi, I think the what I'm reading from the question is we have a bunch of layoffs, but if AI is not being successful and having all these poor performances, why are we laying people off when it's delivering broken results to an extent? What's the hot take on what's
Yeah.
happening?
Yeah. So it's a nuanced, my hot take is kind of nuanced. So having presented in front of a lot of boards and worked at the executive level, the board has a mandate to do what the shareholders want. And if the shareholders are banging on the doors of the exec team and saying, hey guys, you need to be adopting AI because every other company is, and we want to protect our investment. And the executive team pushes back and says, hey, this stuff isn't proven yet. The board's still going to say, you need to take the risk. You need to adopt this stuff. Start laying people off, because of the way the market's working. So a lot of the layoffs that you see are, um, a lot of them occur from board level conversations with shareholders where the shareholders are forcing teams to lay people off. They're forcing them into this shift to adopting AI tools and AI capabilities before those are developed. So you're going to see, I often get asked this question: do I believe that there's going to be a massive loss of white collar jobs due to AI? And it's interesting. I think there's a forcing that's occurring, but not for the right reasons. And In fact, I see often the opposite, which is that when companies adopt AI, they need to hire more people than what they have, at least people with the right skill sets. They've got to upskill people to take better control over tools and capabilities. And you're starting to see that happen. I think the other thing about the hot take that I would share is that there's going to be a redistribution of jobs. I don't believe we're going to end up with like some net 90% or 30% decrease in employed people. That's a bunch of fear mongering, and it's never proven out in any tech revolution all the way back to the printing press. It just redistributes work. That's what happens. However, I think what's important to take away here is if you're not upskilling yourself, you may find yourself most likely without a lot of leverage or control in the job market or your job. That is what I would encourage people to be thinking about. Or build your own thing. One of those two. But either way, don't don't jump off the train, get on the train. That would be my hot take for you. Garrett, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, Z just commented sort of what I was about to speak to a little bit is it's like with all things, there's a myriad of approaches and outcomes. And Dan's 100% right. A lot of it is board pressure, investor pressure. There's also some founders, CEOs, execs are just want to move fast, break things, and implement things, and they see it working. They see the magic solution, and they're like, "Cool, throw it everywhere." And then they might get ahead of themselves and fire to look good for this quarterly earnings or to try to then redistribute that wealth, as I saw some put in here on future investments. That happens. And then they have to pull that back as per the other side. And then there's some that are very disciplined and rigorous and implement the right process and structure and workflows and system of checks and balances and multi-failure step models to catch things before they go into code and break things. And they're able to get a lot more production out of this stuff. And when they see that value and prove it out, they realize, hey, we need to restructure our roles in our org to provide more value for what their skills are because we don't have to do certain types of work anymore. And so to what Dan's saying, it's less about whole roles get erased right away, but tasks within roles do, and they restructure those roles, which might be less human beings to do the tasks, all those tasks over time. And so we might see layoffs as a result of that. So there's many paths to Rome in this case, but those are the three that come to mind for me.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway from me, having worked in AI, like I said, since 2008, um, it's counterintuitive, I think, for a lot of folks who haven't been spending time in working with AI products and platforms in companies at scale. It's humans. Humans are going to make the biggest difference with AI. It's not the tools, it's not the models, it's the way humans use them. That is the key. And so there'll always be a role for human, and that's a perfect lead in, by the way, to Vibe Coding 2.0, which we'll get to here in a second. So great question. Thanks for asking that. The other main value or failure mode with Vibe Coding 1.0 is this idea of hallucinations, where, like Garrett was mentioning, the software gives you certainty that it didn't hallucinate, but it did. And there's examples of that you saw on the prior slide. There's also the approval monkey trap. So I don't know how many people here have tried vibe coding, where you're using Claude Code, let's say, or Codex, or maybe you're in a harness like Cursor, or Bolt, or Lovable, VO, Replit, one of those, and you're chatting with it, and it's just saying approve, reject, approve, reject, approve, reject. That's a super common flow. And so what people will do is they'll say, oh, approve, 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 because they don't know, they don't understand what is being asked of them by the coding assistant. They don't understand software engineering. They don't understand the language being used. And so they're just deferring ownership. They're deferring control and autonomy to the tool. And that's what we call the approval monkey trap, where you just go, I want something quick. Approve, 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 approve. Um, Confident chat is not evidence that it works. And that repeats over and over and over again. And that's an example here on the left in this figure. You're just chatting with it, and it tells you, hey, all the tests have passed. The refactor is complete. It's been shipped. It's ready for review. We're done. That's not the same thing as actually running true script tests and actually having verification, which that's the big gap. So the bottom line, if you can't prove to yourself with the coding agent that it's done, then the agent didn't do it or they didn't do it right. And that's a big part of what we call the false done. You think it's done, but it's not, and you end up with crud. So context collapse and false done are probably the two biggest problems with vibe coding 1.0. Everybody I know who's vibe coded has fallen into these two traps repeatedly. I've fallen into these many times. So here's the pivot. Vibing is not building. I just want to be really clear here. Vibing is not building. And I think what I want to have you take away from this is it's the 2.0, vibe coding 2.0 is not about chatting, it's about orchestrating. And so what does that mean? The heck does orchestration mean? You can think about orchestrating an orchestra, kind of a similar idea. Essentially, you become the human judge and the gatekeeper and the workflow gatekeeper, excuse me, of the work that's getting done. And that's what Vibe Coding 2.0 is all about. It's really a management discipline. It has less to do with the tools and more to how you harness the tools. And so there are essentially kind of three practices here. Garrett, I think it'd be interesting for you to describe your experience coming into the boot camps and how this aligns with what you've learned.
When I first went into the boot camp, and I was building, I was treating AI like a tool, and I was telling it what to do, and it was doing it, and then I was seeing it happen, and then it would break something or not do what I wanted, and I kept thinking about I just need to communicate more clearly and give more context. What I realized is AI is much better at most of this than I am, and so I learned how to use it as a collaborator and build the plan with me in collaboration with my vision, and then I would quality check it over and over until I felt like it was accurate. Then after planning, then I would use it as the tool, but allow it, and then I would be the system of checks and balances, not the other way around. And so for me, orchestration was how to be strategic, how to plan, how to use it as a builder tool, and then the checks and balances to have it check itself and then move forward piece at a time. Whereas when I started, it was just, oh, I work on that. Okay, that looks shiny. I'll go work on that. I'll come back to that. And I created a mess and had to redo it. So I learned that even though the costs are lower than ever and it's easier than ever, the orchestration and the strategy and the intention is more important than ever at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. I think most people have to go through a couple failed vibe coding experiments. I don't remember who made this comment at the beginning, but you made a comment like, I'm probably going to have to fail a few times to learn. And honestly, that's the best way to learn. Um, but it's not any fun if you're just doing this by yourself, trying to learn, and you don't have a safety net to help you. And that's a big part of the environment that we've been using with the boot camps, by the way. Just as an example, I know other boot camps have different approaches, but what we found is that by providing the students with engineering support, live one-on-one engineering support, real-time mentorship of people who've gone through the boot camp in previous cohorts and have done it, and then real-time facilitation from Garrett and I, you have a much greater likelihood of having low risk fail and instead of failing maybe 85%, maybe you only fail 15%. And the rest of the time you're learning the practices and you're building something in a supportive environment that can get you from an idea to a shipped product. So I think what Garrett touched on, orchestration and intent, are two of the most important pillars. The third pillar, I'm sure everybody's heard on this call of Claude. You should have a Claude MD or an agent's MD. What does that mean? That's a markdown file. Um, Probably some folks on the call that have never seen Markdown. If you haven't seen Markdown and you want to see what it looks like, I'll pop one up here at the end of the presentation. Just put it in the chat, and I'll show you what a Markdown file looks like, because that's essentially the way that you use AI coding tools effectively. So when I right here where it says Markdown as canonical, what that means is you're actually driving the conversation with the AI coding tool through these Markdown files. You're chatting with the tool for planning, but all your source of truth doesn't live in the context window. It lives in these files that sit on your machine or in the cloud. And it's plain English. That's what makes it so accessible. It's super cool. And once you get comfortable with this, all of a sudden you feel like you've got wings. It feels like the Red Bull commercial. Whoa, I just drank a Red Bull. I got wings. That's kind of how this feels. It's super cool. So the big distinction here is vibe coding 2.0 is not about prompting and just wildly following a tool. It's about having a management system where you have the autonomy and drive the workflow and retain the source of truth, and you tell the coding agent what to do. That is the power. So we talk about, I don't know, Garrett, do you have anything more you want to say on that topic before I shift?
No, I think we covered it okay, and we'll keep pace and keep going through, and I want to leave a good chunk of time for engagement at the end. So
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
I think we'll keep pace. And Vidya, I was about to comment on your question that I read it, saw it, but I'm gonna save it till we get through this section. So I think it'll be more relevant a little later.
perfect. Okay, I'm going to go through this quickly. So there's three core principles of vibe coding 2.0 as we see them. The first one is tiny active memory. So instead of shoving tons of context and content into the chat window, you actually constrain what you give the AI coding tool, what is put into its active memory, with the smallest amount of context possible. So it sounds super, it's complete opposite, really, of all of the advice that was given in Vibe Coding 1.0. And keeping a really narrow vision is what keeps all the code stable. So we call it the rule of three files. There is this tiny active memory, and I can show you what that looks like if anybody's curious. So that's number one. And it's these three files here, agent MD, decisions MD, and to do MD underneath the 0, 1. But this is how you keep the code stable. This is how you end up with the product that you actually wanted to produce. And once you adopt this, there's no going back. You just all of a sudden realize how much power you were given. It's I don't know, it's like Thor's hammer. You kind of go, whoa, okay, I can fly with this. The second principle is evidence over confidence. So I don't care if the AI tool is telling me, oh, you're amazing, Dan. Oh, this code looks great. I ignore it because it's just trying to tell me what it thinks I want to hear, which is not what I want to hear. So principle number two is every change have a durable artifact of proof. That could be in a markdown file. It could be a log record, etc. But it is a way to make sure that you have the evidence that says, I have an audit trail that shows that this thing I wanted to have happen happened. And here was the decision that was made, and here's what wasn't made. And that all gets documented. That is evidence over confidence. Don't trust the machine. Don't trust the coding agent to do your bidding until you've given it the constraints and the truth and the instructions that you want to give it in the right way. So that's principle number two. And principle number three is be the pilot, not the passenger. Retain your autonomy and be the human gatekeeper. Don't be the approval monkey. Don't just sit there and go, yes, 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 because you're not interested, let's say, in learning a process. And if you're not interested in learning a process, then just be the approval monkey and know you're not going to get good output. But if you want something that works, this is the way you do it. Okay. So the difference here from 1.0 to 2.0 is that success now is the human, it's a result of human judgment and orchestration. It's not allowing the AI tools just to do their thing. It's kind of the equivalent of getting into a Tesla with full self-driving and telling it, okay, I'm going to go for it. Go whatever speed you want, full self-driving wherever I go. You just give up control. You would never do that. Same thing here. Don't believe the hype, retain control.
Real quick, Dan, what's an
Yeah.
example of an artifact of proof for the group?
Oh, an
In
artifact of
order,
proof. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, it could be all sorts of things. It could be a document that gets automatically created. It could be like a memory file that shows like, here's everything that here's all of the decisions and choices that were made during a conversation. An artifact of proof could be a test verification that says, okay, you spec this thing out. I ran a test and it performs exactly as the spec. Okay. It's going to generate a test result. And that
and
result
that
gets
could
logged. That's an
and that
artifact
could
of
be
proof.
like, and could that be like an evaluation criteria, like some script you run to say like, okay, for this to be
Yeah.
considered a successful and finished build, you must run this evaluation, and it must hit each of these markers or metrics.
Yeah. It's got to pass the success criteria, right? The acceptance criteria. There's a lot of different types of artifacts of proof, a lot. And that's something we talk about in the boot camp to help people understand. Um, the last bit I would say is, so we talked about three principles, but the last bit is the workflow, which is the orchestrator cockpit. So to do this right, to do this well, you will have to learn some new software. There's no way around it. The most common cockpit is VS Code. Don't let the name scare you off. VS Code is just like it's basically an interface that provides windows into different software packages. Okay. And VS Code, you basically learn how to run this interface. It's called the terminal, terminal first. It accesses the files, the markdown files on your machine. It accesses the different software packages that you have to load into your environment. Um, it's where Claude Code, the interface for Claude Code lives. So you're not going onto the web and just using Claude Code via web interface. You're actually using it through this orchestrator cockpit. Um, and once you learn how it works, it's incredibly powerful. It is the most common software development interface on the planet. More software developers use VS Code than any other development environment. Um, don't let it scare you. It once you learn how to use it, and it's not a big lift, you go, oh, okay, that wasn't as scary as I thought it was. Um, the bottom line here is that you've got to use professional methods to get real high grade, high quality software outcomes. There's just no way around it. You have to do that. And so it requires an investment. You got to be open to learn and you got to be willing to fail. And if you're open to those things, the world becomes your oyster. We've seen some amazing products get built. Um, Here's some examples. Here are four companies that emerged out of the boot camps. These are four different people who came into our boot camps, non-technical people, came in with an idea and exited realizing, wait a minute, I think I want to build a company on this. And I've actually built companies. You can go to these URLs if you want to see. I highly encourage you to interact with these companies. Um, two of the folks on here, Danny with Tel Pastel and Jane with Emma Advisor, actually mentor now the bootcamp participants. But these are people who essentially non-technical people vibe coded an entire business, and they have quit their jobs, and this is what they're doing. Artie up on the left, he's actually getting around to funding. Get Strive, he's been bootstrapping, and I'm advising him on the next level of his growth. But it's so cool to see eyes light up when people realize, oh my God, this isn't as scary and crazy as I thought it was. It's not. If you're in the right environment with the right support and the right community, you can do amazing things. So these are just four examples where orchestration can turn an ambitious idea or even a less than ambitious idea, honestly, even just a notion in your head, into a real durable business. Um, all of these folks did this within 6 months last year. So we're fully expecting more businesses to be arising out of the boot camps. It's pretty exciting. And if you guys want to be one of those businesses, or you've just got an idea and you just want the support, um, there's there's lots of different boot camps out there. I encourage you to find one that fits and matches with what you want and need. Of course, we have our own, but I'm not here to pitch that. I'm here just to say, get on the train, upskill and explore. The barrier is so low right now, and we're so early days. So many people are just cowering in the corner, saying, "Oh my God, it's overwhelming. I don't know what to do," and they don't start. Just get off dead center. That's the key.
Yeah, what Dan and I have talked a lot about this, and we're beyond being passionate about the technology and the impacts it has on the world, business, people. Um, we recognize the trend that's happening, and the thing that we're most passionate about is helping people, as he said, get on the train and not be left behind. There's a mix of, do you want to help the organization you're in make this transition, provide better tools and work so that you all can achieve your goals more quickly? Do you as an individual want to build something for yourself or for the world and your own business or your own tool? Do you want to develop your skill sets so you're more attractive to companies so that you can be more valuable, secure jobs? Whatever your reason is, the only way you're going to be able to bridge that gap is by getting your hands on the tools and actually learning the workflow and the tools so that you can become an orchestrator and bridge that gap. And so, Dan and I are talking about doing courses for high school students. We have a course coming up for Duke for PhD and college students to learn this stuff. We do these public boot camps. We do private boot camps. And the whole idea of what we want to do is just impose upon you the importance of just getting your hands on it in whatever way that makes sense for you.
Yeah. Thank you, Garrett. You nailed it. Yeah. We are in a golden era. Um, and personally, I remember the SaaS era because I was the founding product manager for an enterprise SaaS product before Salesforce started, like right at the early days. There was no playbooks. It just feels just like now. My whole career has been like this. I did this with this. I did it with API platforms. I did it with mobile at eBay. I've seen this repeat over and over and over. And a lot of people get left behind because they're just fearful and they're scared. And you just got to find the right supportive community and the right group of people to help you. That's what this is all about. Like, let's help each other not get left behind. So the identity shift that we're asking people to make for Vibe Coding 2.0 is to think of yourself like the CEO of your product, whatever that product is. That product could be a simple website. It could be something super advanced like workflow automation or an agent. It could be a SaaS product. It could be a personal project, a professional project. I mean, the world is your oyster. But at the end of the day, it's learning how to orchestrate with intent to create something that works. Okay, that's the identity shift. Go from just being, an approval monkey vibe coder to being the product CEO that you have within you that just needs to get unleashed. Everybody's got it. You just don't know it. I can tell you that right now. Everybody's got it. So I'll close right on this section here. Stop vibing and start orchestrating. Just get in the game and start building software. If, as I said, you're curious and you want to attend one of the boot camps that we offer, we're happy to talk about those. Here's some information about those, or find a boot camp that fits your needs, your budget, your timing, and all of that. We have kind of rotating boot camps. We run 2-day boot camp. We run a 4-week boot camp. 2-day is get in and get your hands dirty. It's super fast. It's kind of like the fast buffet, and the 4-week is much more in depth, and you go from an idea to like a pretty good sized working product at the end. Depends on your own investment of time, etc. But 4 weeks just gives us a lot more time to help you. So Garrett, anything you want to say here before we dive into the
Yeah, I
questions?
was getting links in the chat. That's the 2-day one I just put in. But the way I frame them too is I've been developing the language positioning for these, and we've evolved the 2-day to be 2 half-day Fridays, consecutive half-day Fridays with a week of asynchronous building in between, where we have engineers available to support you. So if you ever want to hop on a call to have them look at your code, brainstorm your next build, etc., you can do that by the click of a button. And that gives people more time under task to learn the craft. And so the way I'm framing it is the 2 days with the optional week build at your own pace is to learn the craft, and the 4 week is to master it. And so when I say master it, I'm referring to the slides Dan presented on. So I'm going to then tailor this back to, or pass this back to Dan, because we've got a few questions on, I tried to answer one on context management, but the second piece of context management got two other questions on was the file architecture. So how to use agent MD or Claude MD, decisions MD to do, et cetera, from the sense of, we talked about drift management, but also about cost management.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay. So the advice out there is to have like a Claude MD file, which is a file that keeps the context of your project always in active working memory in Claude. Um, that's actually not the right way to do it, even though everybody tells you to do that. It doesn't scale. As your product scales, you have more source of truth. If you keep stuffing that into the Claude MD file, you'll end up with the same problem that existed before, which is too much context getting shoved into each chat. Because every conversation turn, I know if you don't know this, this might be helpful. Every turn of a conversation when you're chatting loads the entire context that you gave it each time. It's not just what you just chatted. It's what you just chatted plus everything else and all the other stuff you gave it. So you can run out of tokens super fast and you start to drift. And that's why in prompt engineering and context engineering, when I was teaching this at the University of Washington, we talk we talk about one-shot prompts, getting good at prompting, but just doing one prompt. And if what comes back from the chat agent isn't correct, throw away the prompt and start again, totally fresh. And so if you're just sitting there prompting and you have a long conversation going with a chat, it's getting off track and decaying and you don't even know it. And if you're using a Claude MD file, you're kind of codifying what it's forced to remember every single time. So um, let me do this. I'm going to share just so somebody can see this. Let me show you my Typora. So I use a product called Typora. This is on a Mac. It's a native Markdown file manager. Um, this is an example. This is my own project. Okay, this is kind of an old version, so I'm not showing you anything. It's confidential, but this is an example of my agent MD file. Now you might ask, what do you mean by agent MD? So it is I am AI coding assistant agnostic. I use Claude and I use Codex, and I use them interchangeably because they have different personalities and they do different things really well. I also use Gemini, but I don't use it for coding. Um, so Agent MD is a file that all agents can read. So this gets loaded, and whether I'm in Claude or I'm in Codex or I'm in Cursor, um, this gets read the same way and interpreted the same way. But this entire, you can see here, it's just English. It's just English. Now, it may not be English you speak normally, like you wouldn't walk up to somebody and speak this way, but this is the way that the
You
language
might,
is. Well, yeah, I might, but if
you
I'm
yeah, you
talking
might not, but don't speak for me.
Garrett does walk around saying shared commands, shared commands. But what I've done here in this file, and you can see here, I'm going to scroll to the bottom. The whole thing is 69 lines. This is super short. You've probably all heard that comment, like, there's old adage. I think it was like Einstein or somebody said, "Hey, I would have written you a 2-page note, but I've written a 7-page note because I didn't have enough time to write the 2-page note." It's a lot harder to get a shorter much more concise, precise markdown file for your agent MD. It takes effort. So the fact that I've gotten to 69 lines is in the world of vibe coding is kind of magical. Um, this is like kind of it's kind of like world class in a way. Like I've spent a lot of time doing this. A normal Claude file might be 200 lines, and those 200 lines are getting sucked up every context window. My 69 lines, if you'll notice here, I have nothing in here about my project except these 3 lines. No other context. All the rest of it is saying what stays in active memory, what's the scope of the build, what are the rules that always get loaded, how does it execute, what are the shared commands, and then how do I verify that things have happened. This is the coming out of something I've created called pre-code operating system. We teach this in the boot camp. It is a professional grade operating system to teach non-technical builders how to build durable software. And this is my 30 years of product management and software engineering experience and data science experience condensed down into this replicable system that you get to use. And when you finish the boot camp, you get to use that system going forward. And I have a public repo, it stays updated, etc. And it applies to things like a to-do file. This is all going to look like gibberish to you right now, but when you're in the boot camp, you learn this and you go, oh man, you'll start to figure it out super quick. And things like decisions. So you're going to use markdown files to do this right. It's really the only way that this stuff scales.
Thank you, Dan, Garrett. Amazing. We're almost at 1, and I know some people have to drop. Are you both able to stay for another 15 minutes for questions?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is, if you need to drop, thank you for spending the hour with us. We do have the recording. We will send it out. For those of you who have a bunch of questions and want to ask Dan and Garrett, we'll take those now. But before everybody drops, I'm going to just, anybody who knows me knows that I'm fanatic about collecting NPS. So we will, if you get a chance, well, actually, it's not if you get a chance. Everybody, please do this because feedback is a gift. Take out your phone, point your camera to the QR code. There's 3 questions there. Would you recommend Garrett and Dan's session to a friend or a colleague? What did you like best? What could have gone better? Or if you'd rather just type on your desktop, you can go to the bit.ly. The link is right there. And so we'll just keep up the screen for the next few minutes while everybody shares feedback. Let's go ahead and take some questions. So if you have a
Just
question,
a
hop
quick
on.
note. I think that QR code, at least for me, is pointing to the Los Angeles Times. I'm not sure if that's the correct QR code.
Oh, that's weird. Okay. Well, then I'm going to have to talk to my ops person about that. So everybody ignore the QR code.
It
And if
actually
you can,
worked for me,
type
just
the
a heads up.
bit.ly into
It
the
Okay.
worked
It
for
Yeah, it
works
worked
others.
for
for me
me.
Oh, it
too.
does
Worked for
work?
me,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I should have double checked though beforehand. So not sure what happened. Okay, we think it works. Go ahead and share the feedback. Let's take some questions. And everybody who needs to drop, thank you for spending the hour with us. For those who have questions, let's go ahead and take the first one. And feel free to go off of mute. Um,
I can go first.
awesome.
Thank you so much for the content and the overview. Very engaging and very well put. I'm interested in the 2-day bootcamp, but I'm not an engineer, a product manager. Also don't have coding background. So what would be your guidance on selecting whether, what is it, 4-week or a 2-day camp? And then, what should I anticipate as I make that decision and sign up?
That's a great question. The boot camps, whether you do 2 days or 4 weeks, it's designed specifically for you.
Mhm.
It's for non-technical, non-product, non-engineering people. That's exactly you're the sweet spot. I would say if it's really the scope of what you want to do, that's really the answer for you. And if you decide to take the 2-day, I'll just make this comment for everybody here. If you decide to take a 2-day with us, you get that credited towards the cost of the four week. So you can do the 2 day, try it on and say, okay, I want to go learn more. I want to go deeper. I want to take a product, a bigger scope product or something that I hadn't conceived of before. Maybe it's got a deep security layer to it or requires SOC 2 compliance, like we've heard. You can go then take the 4 week and you get a credit towards the 4 week. So you can't lose.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I posted in the chat, Ashu. The way I think about it and the way I'm trying to position it, the way we teach it is, if this is your first time getting your hands on these tools, you don't have your computer set up with the software, the systems, the packages we mentioned earlier, you have to download, you haven't gone through an end-to-end build from idea through PRD to deployment, where it's live and people can access it and use it and give you feedback, I would recommend the 2 day just to learn the craft. And then the 4 week is if you've already learned the craft to some level of degree and you want to master it, that's the 4 week.
Yeah. If you've dabbled in vibe coding, the 4 week is probably your jam. If you've never even touched this stuff, the 2 day is a great starting point.
Yep.
Yeah. I go ahead, Garrett.
David, we are publishing landing pages here soon, but we can try to send a follow-up email. We can give like a screenshot of what's about to be published online. But the advanced course, Jordan, is the 4 week. So that's sort of the master the craft. So what we do is, sorry, I'm gonna go.
I have a
Oh,
quick question
yeah.
if we're still
Go ahead,
taking
Rob.
some.
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you guys. Don't know how to explain this other than y'all have taken something very complex and translated it in a way that my slow brain could process it. So thank you guys. I
You're
am
welcome.
going to be studying the notes I took. My question is, if we have projects, or I've tried to do some of this myself on just passion projects and things like that on the side. Um, does that, I know that there was learning from building that myself, but is it better to restart that project with this foundation, or can you start to translate some of the work that's already been done into this foundation, I guess?
Yeah, I think the way I would think about it is this. Did you build anything working?
Yeah, yeah. I have a little project right now that I'm working on with my son, which is really fun.
And so there's something about that though that's in your head is saying, I can't scale this.
I think, yeah, I think it's just I mean, it's like every time I do a little bit of learning, I uncover a whole new
Yeah.
uh, university degree that I need to learn very quickly. And AI helps me learn that quickly, which is great, but it's also
Yeah.
not 100% factual. So yeah, it's not necessarily the scaling part, but it's just I've gone in and in this project I have a lot of manual data that I've been putting in myself, and it's
Mm.
starting to overwrite with some of the API data that's coming in. So it's the process is learning, but I guess am I too far gone down this experiment that I should start over? I don't know how to explain it other than that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're not. You've built knowledge and context through this effort that you've gone through. That's completely useful in coming in and being in a boot camp. Technically, so I can't comment on whether or not your code would need to get refactored because I don't see it. But everything you've learned so far, it benefits you coming into a boot camp because you've already started. That's the key. You've just taken the first step, and that's the hardest part is just doing that first step. For everybody on this call, I think the most important thing I would say is this. We've designed this boot camp. One way it's unique from all other boot camps is that we have one-on-one engineering, dedicated engineering support. Plus you get mentors, plus you get instructors. So this isn't us just teaching you a tool and then saying, okay, here's a bunch of theoretical stuff of how the tool works and you figure it out. That's not what this is. This is an actual practical guided experience. You're in a cohort with a bunch of other people with you got the engineers, so you got an engineering department behind you to help you unblock all the technical junk that's going to get in your way. You've got mentors who've been through this and know all the failure modes, and you've got instructors who are going to help teach you. So it's about as supportive as you can get. So no matter what you've already done, that is going to translate over. You're just going to be able to learn a whole bunch of skills. You're going to learn methodology. You're going to learn framing, some frameworks, and you're going to be given wings to actually take this to where you want it to go. We've seen some, like I've said, we've seen some really amazing things. People come in with literally a rough idea and they leave with literally, like Danny, who created Tell Pastel. I love this example. He wanted to figure out a way to retain the memories of his kid while his kid is growing up. He's motivated by like a strong family reason. And so he created Tell Pastel to create memory books based on experiences that he and his wife were having with their son. And so now and he said, I want the rest of the world to benefit from this. So he did it for himself, but he's turned it into a business. I can't think of anything better. I got a 25-year-old kid. If I had had that 25 years ago, I'd probably have 1,000 memory books logged, because that's what life's about. Great memories with people. So anyway, that's what I would tell you. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. Yeah. Other questions?
There's been a few requests here for the syllabus. Any links for the syllabus? And also, what is the tech stack that's going to be used here that you prefer? And what tech stack do you guys saying we don't do this? Like, I haven't heard anyone talk about OpenClaw or Kilo or anything like that versus this. What things do you actually going to be using? And is that limited by what's used in the 2-day versus what's used in the 4-week? Everyone has preferred kind of tools that they like to work with. I'd just like to know what's included.
Yeah, that's such a good question, Greg. So to standardize our ability to support everybody, I'll talk about the 4-week, the 2-week, the 2-day runs very similarly, but we use Claude Code. It's kind of the gold standard. We have enterprise license, so it makes it easy. So we use Claude Code. You use VS Code. You're going to use MongoDB unless you need a different DB, but pretty much we try and standardize on Mongo. A Next.js React front end. Unless you need something different, you're going to use Clerk for auth unless you need something different. So it's a pretty it's a core set of it's a core stack. And then if for design, probably just use Claude. Claude Design works phenomenally. It's been working incredibly well for both Garrett and I versus Figma, Visibly, and all the others. If you have Figma and you prefer Figma, you can pull Figma files in. So it's a pretty standardized stack. Again, the intent is not to teach you tools, though you learn the tools. That's what makes this bootcamp different. We're not teaching you the tools per se. You're learning the tools through the supported and guided process. So what you're really getting out of this bootcamp is the ability to apply the methodology to any tool set. In terms of the syllabus, we can get that over to you. I don't know if Garrett, if that's published yet on the page. I know we just made some changes to the pages.
Yeah, I could here, let me.
Do you have it?
We'll try to share it after. Yeah, I have it up here.
Okay.
This is what a screen looks like when you're a consultant and handling too many things. You have that many windows and tabs open, so judgments to yourselves, please. But this is the 4-week. Okay. This is the 4-week. So PRD, scoping your build, a lot of the build workflow that Dan and I talked about, mostly Dan, the active memory with the file structure, the Cloud MD or Agent MD, Decisions MD, To Do MD, the rituals and guardrails for how to execute your workflow and how to vibe code in a disciplined, continuous habit way that maximizes cost efficiency, minimizes drift, front end, back end. There's some advanced things I don't want to go into now, but is listed here of like, there's simple vibe coding. I want to build a simple workflow or simple integration, and there's more complex ones, and how to approach that, like API connections and architectural modeling of an LLM to have it behave and perform the way you want it to, not the way it's trained to, or else people could just go to ChatGPT and do it, etc. And then speaking of Claude design, this is where I made this site. And then this is the 2-day. So you'll notice that the operating system, that structure foundation isn't there because with only so much time, we want to take you through an end-to-end build so you know what it feels like and looks like, and you have it set up on your computer. The PRD is pre-work, so I'll give you templates, you'll fill it out. We'll be available in Slack to help guide you through filling that out. But when you come in, you're ready to just paste and get the front end going. We help you set up your local environment and your back end by the end of the first day, so that you have the whole week to just vibe code and use the tools, techniques, tips and tricks, best practices that we've gone over together. And then you can message us in Slack or schedule time with engineers to build. And then day 2 is teaching you those advanced things we cover in more depth in the 4-week, so that when you continue to build after the bootcamp, you have that knowledge and experience to do that on your own. Then we take you through deployment and then do live demos and graduation Q&A at the end. So a lot of the things we'll cover together in depth and walk through step by step in the 4-week, we just touch on in the 2-day because there's not enough time, and we want you to just get familiar with what it feels like to build.
Greg, does that answer your question? Do you have others?
That certainly answers some of it. Yeah, that answers a lot of it. Like a second part of it, do you guys go over like MCP connections and stuff like that, just in terms of just expanding in terms of what we have access to and kind of what the reach is? Or I know you're not talking about specific tools, but I think that's probably generalized enough for this, correct or no?
Yes. So MCP could be part of your solution, but I will say this. How to say this without sounding like a negative Nelly. OpenClaw and MCP, I highly discourage people from having that be anywhere part of their first couple of builds of anything. It's a solution looking for a problem, and people who end up who don't have experience with having built, let's say, full systems, believe the hype about OpenClaw and see everybody teaching OpenClaw and thinking you got to have OpenClaw and you got to have a Mac Mini. It leads to failure 95% of the time for most people, and it's not the kind of failure that teaches you anything. It's because people haven't done the fundamentals well. What we're teaching, and not to say, Greg, that if you've got the fundamentals, if you feel like you understand software engineering practices, and the OS that we deliver and we give to you feels comfortable, and you're like, okay, I speak this terminology, I understand, I have a really clear sense of what I want to build, I have a really clear sense of what good and bad looks like. Yes, we can go there with you. But I'm going to tell you it's probably 1 in 1,000 people where that is the case. But we'll support you. That's part of what the boot camps are about. But that's not what we're doing these for. We're trying to get people to build because there's a lot of ways that you can do. You don't have to build a OpenClaw. You can do that with skills and knowledge, and there's a whole bunch of other ways to do that are much more productive, efficient, and easier to learn as an on-ramp to prepare you for that solution, if that solution is the right thing. So I hope that answers your question. It's a little bit like I'm not going to teach you how to drive the Ferrari until you've learned how to drive, the BMW.
Let's take 1 or 2 last questions and then we'll wrap, and then we'll send out the recording and other resources as well. So if you have a question, just come off of mute. Garrett, did you see anything in the chat that you also want to call out?
I've been pretty good about trying to type responses, especially when I got called out for removing M dashes, which I did because I hate M dashes, which does mean I did use AI as a collaborator. But I obsessive over details in language, so I did have to rewrite most of it. It just helps with pictures and formatting, because I'm bad at that part. I think we pretty much got to most things, so I'll open to the group if you want to ask anything, or if I did miss anything, my apologies. Speak now, or I wouldn't say forever hold your peace, but hold your peace for just a little while longer.
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing. I was looking in the chat. There was kind of a common thread that people were asking about frameworks and governance, things that you need at the enterprise level. That's absolutely part of what we discuss. So if you're in an enterprise situation, or you're building for your business or the company you're working in, you'll get as much benefit out of this approach than you would if it's just a personal project. So we can go and talk about security and governance for you and your project, as much as it maybe for somebody else, security and governance doesn't matter at all because it's just a personal project. So we cover that range. Sorry. Any more questions? I mean, if there are any more questions, oh yeah, Ruchi.
So just I think I see it, and I think you mentioned it. To show up for the 4-week boot camp or the session, we just need Claude subscription. That's it, right? Like you mentioned MongoDB and like other things, and you don't need any of those, right? Or like, I don't know. I've used other harnesses that you mentioned, but I have the
Yeah.
same worries that they are not working. So if I, yeah, sorry, you got my question.
Yeah. MongoDB is free. We like use the free one to get you on at the free service. We provide deployment, or Ember provides deployment services. So Render, Versal, those things are covered as a part of the bootcamp and all of that. The only thing you have to pay for on your own is the cloud subscription. They're heavily subsidized, so way cheaper than pay as you go, because you can connect an API from any LLM you want. But because we're on Claude Code, we recommend Claude. And there's Claude Pro, which is $20 a month, I believe, or Claude Max, which is $100. I recommend the 20 for simple builds, like a simple tool. If you're learning the workflow on the 2-day, you don't want to spend the 100. That is good enough, and I've seen that work well enough. If you're doing the 4-week or doing any type of complex build, or you intend to vibe code quite a bit in that week in between the 2-day, then you might want to do the $100 one, so you don't run into token limits or token gates.
That's good.
And I will offer one thing here. So I vibe code. I'm building an entire two-sided marketplace, consumer marketplace, a la kind of what you might see eBay, but it's not eBay, or Airbnb, but it's not that. It's in a different segment. I get by on $20 a month with Claude Code.
Okay.
And I get by on the same with Codex. And I mean, this is a big platform. It's possible to do. The key is context management. So you don't need to go spend $100. You do if you're going to vibe code 1.0 it, just blather and approval monkey. But if you're going to do it in a very constrained, meaningful, intentful way, you don't need to go spend that money. That's just those companies wanting you to spend that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
All right, I think we should wrap.
Oh,
Garrett and Dan, thank you for spending the time with us and teaching me even a couple new things. So appreciate it, and they are excellent instructors. So thank you everybody for staying with us for an hour and 20. We will see you tomorrow. We'll have another speaker series session on building the PM operating system. So that's going to be a great session too. If you haven't signed up for it, there are links to sign up for it. So hopefully we'll see you there tomorrow.
Yeah. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn, folks, if you're at all curious.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.